dress because he looks almost like any other child in the pool. When Jimmy is finally pointed out to the lifeguard by the chaperones of the party, he still doesn't react immediately because Jimmy doesn't look much different from anyone else in the water. Not until Jimmy is underwater for about 45 seconds does the lifeguard then react. He goes in, gets Jimmy out of the water, and can't believe that this child that he had seen was unconscious. He brought him to the side of the pool, opened his airway, and as soon as he opened Jimmy's airway, Jimmy started to cough and started to vomit up a lot of the pool water that he'd been swallowing. And then the lifeguard heard a great sound. He heard Jimmy start to cry. Jimmy started breathing on his own. When the EMTs came, Jimmy was upright, he was sitting up, and he was talking. Jimmy spent one night in the hospital and then was back the next day at the YMCA for his baseball game. So we had a good outcome, but we can see just how close this event came to being a tragedy. As a camp counselor, your role in protecting the kids in the water is extremely important. I'm going to tell you a story about a little 5-year-old boy named Ben. He was at day camp, at the pool, of course, and the group went in, and they were supposed to stay in the shallow end of the pool. Now, they decided that they wouldn't go through their procedure of swim testing and marking the kids and then keeping them all within arm's reach in the shallow end because, well, we know the kids who are in our group, so we don't need to put the wristbands on them. Well, Ben's a 5-year-old boy, and he sees some of the toys that are out in the deeper part of the water. So where do you think he's going to go? He keeps trying to go away from his counselors, and his counselors notice and say, Ben, come on back here. Well, one of the times that he does this, they don't notice. The next time Ben is noticed, the lifeguard in the deep section of the pool notices Ben next to one of the toys, about a foot below the surface of the water, staring up, scared, and with his eyes open. Now, as soon as the lifeguard saw this, she blew her whistle, jumped in, and rescued Ben. When they pulled Ben out of the water, he was coughing, and he vomited a little bit of pool water that he had swallowed, but he was doing okay, and he never lost consciousness. They did call 911, and EMTs came and checked him out and decided that he was doing okay. They brought him to the emergency room where he was released the same day. It seems like it was a very good outcome. But the parents, Ben's parents, had to be called to come in and get him. And Ben had a reaction to this. He was later diagnosed with emotional distress and post-traumatic stress disorder and was fearful of going back to the pool, of taking a bath, or even having a water balloon fight at camp.
So once again, I'm guessing that you had a pretty good conversation about some really difficult stories. We know this is difficult stuff to hear, but it happens. And now we'll take a few minutes, Gareth and Josh and I, to try to help you process what you heard. Again, we will probably cover some stuff that you've already talked about, but this is a good way to reinforce. Gareth, let me start with you if I can. Again, we heard difficult stories that unfortunately you hear far, far too often. So I want you to answer kind of two questions for me. What should have been done differently in these stories? And really, if you can, what were the moments of truth? What were the points that people crossed making the wrong decisions?
Well, when we think about the videos that we just saw, especially thinking about Eric's video, there was a lapse in supervision. There were so many people on that pool deck who were responsible for supervising Eric. Yet none of them did at the key moment. There were 5 lifeguards on duty, none of which saw him when he entered the water or went to the bottom of the pool. And there was a handful of camp counselors who were responsible for his direct supervision, who were on the pool deck, who did not see him enter the water and weren't aware anything was happening until the lifeguard jumped in. The moments of truth in Eric's story and in Jimmy's story and in just about every story is that we don't need to wait to the point that the lifeguard is jumping in to make a rescue to save a child. We could have stopped Jimmy from getting into the pool by making sure that he had been swim tested, making sure that he was marked and then protected. If he had been wearing a wristband or a neckband that identified him as a non-swimmer, the lifeguard could have simply blown his whistle and kept him from getting into the deep water. Also with Eric, he could have been marked after he'd been swim tested so that when he got to the side of the pool, the lifeguard could have seen him again, simply blown her whistle and sent him back to the camp counselors who would have been supervising him to make sure he didn't get into water that was unsafe for him.
Now, you've talked a little bit about different things that could have been done at different times, and I know you're a big proponent of there being a system for how to make sure those things get done. So you've talked about test, mark, and protect. But I know you also talk about test, mark, and float. You want to talk about the difference there a little bit?
Sure. Well, the test and the mark are the same. We want to swim test all of our campers to make sure we know who the swimmers are and who the non-swimmers are. The non-swimmers, of course, are at higher risk. We need to mark them so that the counselors and the lifeguards know who's a non-swimmer and who's a swimmer, and then who needs to be protected or who needs to be in different areas of your swimming zone. When we say protect, the best way to protect a child both in your water and in any other water that child might be in is to make sure they're actively engaged in a swim lesson. We want to teach the kids who can't swim who come to camp how to swim so that they're safer when they leave camp and they're going to be safer when they come back to camp next year.
Okay, so Gareth, now we got the system, test, mark, and protect, but I'm working hard to have you not give up on floating. So talk to us about what that means.
Sure. No, we don't want to give up on floating. As I mentioned, the best thing we can do for a camper is to teach them to swim. But I understand we can't do that every single time. We want kids to be in the water and just be having fun as well. But when we do that, we still have to protect non-swimmers. That means making sure they're in a properly fitted U.S. Coast Guard approved life jacket. Still great to have them within arm's reach of our counselors so that they're actively supervised as well. But whether you're in natural water or in a swimming pool, once a child slips below the surface of the water, they're extremely difficult to see. If they're wearing a life jacket, they're not going to slip below the surface of the water.
Now, I just want to press on this a little bit because my guess is there are folks watching this video right now thinking, come on, I'm really going to put my campers in a PFD? Yet you've seen it, right? You've seen it in all kinds of places. So if I'm running a camp right now who's got non-swimmers in the pool, not in a swim lesson, not floated, am I getting to be in the minority, Gareth?
Yes, you are. Traditionally, when we thought about life jackets or personal flotation devices, PFDs, we think about canoeing, we think about boating, we think about when they're out on the blob or on the climbing structure outside of the play area, outside of the swimming area. Even when we're in natural water, we think, okay, it's really hard to see under the surface, so we're going to protect our kids by keeping them in life jackets, even in the swimming zone. Even in swimming pools now, though, we're starting to identify that we still can't see when these children go underwater, and we need to protect them before they slip underwater. So it's becoming much more common to go to camp or really any pool and see children in life jackets, properly protected and supervised by lifeguards.
And of course, your comment about even in a pool, we're still having trouble seeing them when they get under the surface of the water. That's all about what we just saw, disappearing dummies, right? And the glare at the top of the water makes it very difficult to see underneath the water.
That's right. The glare, the motion that the wind makes on the water, also just the way our brains work. If we're looking at people on the surface of the water, we have a very difficult time processing anything that's going on below the surface of the water.
So now let's talk about who's doing the watching, because again, we're back to this idea of a system. So test, mark, and protect, float when necessary. But you talked before about the guards and counselors having responsibility. If I'm a counselor, I may be thinking, what do you mean? This is the lifeguard's responsibility. Can you talk a little bit just specifically about the role of a counselor on the pool deck?
Sure. When we're talking about water safety, we're always talking about layers of protection. So we've talked about test, mark, and protect, or test, mark, and float. We know we have lifeguards who are on duty who are responsible for scanning the swimming area. But we also know that swim time isn't break time for the counselors. Counselors have a crucial role to play in supervising the campers. And how you're going to supervise is different. Just like we talked about graduated autonomy earlier, you're going to supervise a 6-year-old non-swimmer differently than you're going to supervise a 16-year-old who can swim. So for that 6-year-old, we're going to make sure that we're actively engaged with them. Hopefully we're in the water with them, engaging them in a swim lesson or an activity, wearing a life jacket, and making sure, just like we keep closer watch on them anywhere in the camp, we keep closer watch on them in the water. For a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old who's passed the swim test, we can assist the lifeguards. So we learn a little bit about scanning as well as a counselor. We know that we need to search the bottom of the pool or really look at the campers' faces when they're in the water, in either natural water or in the pool. And if we see anything, we can get the lifeguards' attention.
So I'm either another set of hands, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, or I'm another set of eyes.
That's right.
When is the counselor not responsible for the safety of the kids in the pool?
When the kids aren't in the pool.
That's what I was going for. We're talking a lot about systems and the pool, but we also have natural bodies of water. Josh, I want you to help us a little bit with this idea of a buddy system. And how does a buddy check work best when we're in natural bodies of water?
Yeah, buddy system's great for natural bodies of waters, and I would even say for swimming in pools. Ideally, we put kids together that are the same level of swimming. When kids are in the pool, they're going to be swimming with their friends, so they get a buddy who is the same level swimmer that they are, and that they're their friends. And in camps, we always talk about values, the value of responsibility, of keeping each other safe, of looking after each other. So when we set up the activity, Gareth and I are buddies. Gareth, you're responsible for Josh's safety. Josh, you're responsible for Gareth's safety. Anytime you lose Gareth for 5 seconds or more, you yell to the lifeguard that you've lost your buddy. The lifeguard blows the whistle, clears the pool, and either Gareth's on the bottom of the pool and we find him in enough time, or Gareth swam over to the other side. Josh and Gareth go sit on the side of the pool, have a discussion about responsibility. Probably the first day it happens a little bit more, but we're creating an environment where the kids are keeping each other much safer. And the reality is that our lifeguards aren't spotting the people under the water, and that I'm much more likely to know when I've lost my buddy. So all of a sudden we've, at no cost, already all the things that we're naturally doing, swimming together, swimming with our friends, we've created a much safer environment.
So we started by pairing you and Gareth up in the first place, and we had a little conversation about responsibility, right? And so we've encouraged you, if you lose Gareth for anything more than 5 seconds, you're going to yell to the guard's going to blow the whistle, and you kind of tossed off that on the first day it might happen a little bit more often. Josh, do we want it to happen a little bit more often on the first day? In other words, do we want to trigger this system a little bit?
We do. We want to teach kids that it's important, that safety is important, and especially when we're in the water, and especially in natural bodies of water where you can't see the bottom. Mm-hmm. So if Gareth loses me or I lose him, we need it to be triggered, and we need to practice so kids know what to do as well. So they're quick in getting out of the water. So the guards have a chance of saving who's ever on the bottom of the pool.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people will be thinking buddy check in the traditional sense, right? Every 5 minutes, the guards are going to blow a whistle. Right, Gareth? Is that what the old system used to be?
That's the old system, and it can still be a part of your system, the lifeguards calling a 5 or a 10-minute buddy check. But if that's what you're relying on, that's far too long to know that 2 buddies have been missing. As Josh mentioned, we need the buddies to be responsible for one another and bring it to the lifeguard's attention or the counselor's attention. And Josh, when he spoke about this to begin with, was really talking about natural bodies of water. But this is true for natural bodies of water or swimming pools. Whether you've got dark water, natural water, or the supposedly clear water of a pool, a drowning is swift and it's silent. And it's much better if we can have a buddy who is right next to that person be able to bring it to a counselor's attention than for the lifeguard or counselor to have to respond to it first.
So let's stay on that point for just a second. You said a drowning is swift and it's silent, yet some folks may be thinking, you know, Baywatch here. At some point I'll have to stop using Baywatch as an example, but we're expecting people splashing and calling the lifeguard's name and that kind of stuff. That's not at all what happens. And we saw a little bit in the stories about that. Just spend another second on that.
Yeah, Baywatch was both one of the best things and one of the worst things to happen to lifeguards. People knew about lifeguards. It became very popular, very cool. We got people into the jobs. Unfortunately, it perpetuated just about every myth about drowning and about lifeguards that there is. Any episode of Baywatch you see, the lifeguard is going to see a swimmer out in the water who has their arms up, waving, yelling for help, and they do it so long that the lifeguard can run very slowly down the beach to go make that rescue. In real life and in your pool or in your lake, that's not going to happen at all. A child who can't swim spends maybe 10 to 20 seconds at the surface of the water. They don't wave their arms because they don't have the strength to do it. They don't yell for help because all they're trying to do is breathe. And after that 10 to 20 seconds, they silently slip below the surface of the water. And in a natural body of water, and even in a pool, at that point,